got the biggest Wi-Fi.
Apparently.
Vinny's got huge Wi-Fi after that.
Try to brainwash us all.
Yeah. I had to go through the yes.
Oh, yeah, it's not working for me. Yeah. Oh, I'm on guest.
Yeah, guess what as well.
Very much. I will call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Town of Gibsons for January 21st, 2025 at 1 p.m. And we're honored to be gathered here on the traditional territories of the Skokomish Nation. First, we need to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? The motion carries. First item on the agenda is Chief Rob Michael with the Gibsons District Volunteer Fire Department with the 2024 Quarter 4 report. Welcome.
Thank you for having me again. I generally start talking about Q4, but I just wanted to highlight one event in Q1 as it happened late this morning. We ended up responding to a structure fire with 20 volunteers, and we had a couple of pets that were able to be rescued. So that's really recent news, and I just wanted to highlight the successful operation that had occurred this morning.
Around what neighborhood was that?
Around on Pine Street.
Okay.
Yeah. For last quarter, the membership ended at 43 members, with 2 members retiring from the department last quarter when they moved away from the Sunshine Coast. Fire department members attended their annual awards and volunteer appreciation dinner, where a number of firefighters were recognized for their contributions to the community. The focus of training for this quarter was live fire, hazardous materials operations, first responder medical, emergency vehicle operations, and emergency scene management. Gibson's Fire Department members were also able to host several emergency vehicle operation courses throughout the Sunshine Coast in Q4. The Fire Department responded to 93 calls for service, including a mutual aid request for Seashell Fire with an event at the Seashell Hospital, a vehicle fire started by arson, a pedestrian hit resulting in a fatality, an imminent childbirth, and a windstorm resulting in activation of the SRD's Emergency Operations Center. At this time, I'd also like to acknowledge the meaningful and significant monetary donation to the fire department made by Doreen and Duncan McAdam. The fire department received nearly $2.3 million for the purchase of fire department apparatus and equipment. The thoughtful contribution will have significant impact on the safety and security of the community. The members of the department are blown away by this generosity, and words cannot express the shock and gratitude of the department. The fire prevention team completed 43 fire and life safety inspections, 13 referrals, and 1 fire investigation. The fire department also participated in Fire Safety Week by attending each of the schools, and the fire prevention and life safety officer was also requested to speak with a small group of secondary students about vaping and setting off fire alarms. The Gibsons District Public Library improved upon the Fire Smart program with the launch of Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Math, or STEAM kits, as well as scheduled Fire Smart story times throughout the year. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions on fire department activities or projects at this time.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on the McAdam Award because I haven't been able to say this publicly yet, but I also think, and I know you know this well, is Rosa Rogers deserves a great deal of gratitude from the community as well for her work as the executor in trying to figure out the very complex will and what different community services were in need, and we're kind of connected to the will of the McAdams. So we should be hopefully recognizing Rosa for her contribution. I think she doesn't live in Gibsons anymore, but she's someone who's really well known to a lot of us, and it's always nice to see her when she visits.
I would certainly be amiss if I did not recognize Rosa Rogers' efforts as well, and may please council to know that she was also a volunteer for Gibsons Fire, where we had a dedicated seamstress, and she was really proud of the work that she was able to do and contribute to her community, and ongoing with this work that she's done.
Thanks. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White, and through you, Mayor White. In your report, Chief, there's a high number of wire incidences reflected. I'm assuming these are related to the wind storms we've had, and that you've been engaged dealing with hazardous down wires. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can report that a large number of those calls were related to the windstorm. And what'll often happen is we will get bombarded with a large number of calls related to wires down at one time. But that is not the only reason why we may encounter wires down. They could be from other failures or vehicles hitting boxes or just other malfunctions in some of the equipment.
Follow up first.
Thank you, Mayor White. In the event that it's BC hydro wires that are down during a windstorm, is there any compensation paid to the fire department for your responding to these calls, or is it just considered a normal course of action?
I know the answer to that one, but I'll go to you anyway, Chief.
Mayor White may wish to add more, but the short answer is no, there is no remuneration to the fire department from BC Hydro for attendance to these calls.
Yeah, the easy answer to any of those questions is never, sadly. But it's something that a number of communities are advocating for, and I think SCRD is probably putting in a motion this year too to try to recover some funds from the increasing call-outs that are due to other agencies and, of course, the areas of responsibility for our fire departments all over BC. Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you, Mayor. It's interesting because I was going to ask the same question, but I went to previous reports because I thought, oh, maybe I noticed now, but it has happening for a while. And wires is a top in many reports. So I'm curious, is it windy all the time now?
Yes.
I know.
I can answer that too. I mean, we know what the weather's been like.
I know.
Go ahead.
Yes, as per the mayor. But also it's, again, that phenomenon where there's many in quick succession, right? So one wind event can be upwards of 20 or more calls in a single period.
Thanks, and follow up, Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you. I asked Chief this question before, I think, in the meeting, the commission, but I just, at the time, this is about the 6 stories, but at the time you were discussing with the town, and I just want to understand, because the report now says essentially it will limit the height of any proposed building to 6 stories. And I'm just curious what happens with the building that we approved that is 7 stories.
Which building is that? Maybe we should elaborate on that.
Also have
Since this is news to me.
835 Gibsons?
It's 6.
836? Okay, 836 Gibsons.
6 stories.
No, 7.
You're increasing it, I think. Anyway, do you want to comment on I know this is an ongoing issue of dealing with that building in particular and other high buildings, but
Yeah,
it
maybe
is
what I'll
6.
do is maybe not comment on the specific building. And again, we had met and talked at this at length and was trying to come up with a way that is tangible, right? And so we did go to the building code definition and said, you know what, if it's a high building and that has certain criteria, and we worked very closely with the SRD and the town building department to make sure that we were getting on the same page. And so I do use that term essentially because within that height of a high building, you may get an offset that it would be partial 7 or something like that. So the difficulties in that is, does the fire department limit it to 6? Do they limit it to high buildings? Do they limit it by floor space? Do they limit it to, and all these variables? And so we felt that the best course of action was to go to a BC building code definition that was tangible and consistent. So that was where, again, this essentially limits it to 6 stories, but there may be provisions where smaller height floors lead to a bit higher. But I will say that these newer types of structures in our community do come with greater challenges to our firefighting personnel.
Councillor Thompson.
Through you, Mayor. Congratulations on the department exceeding their 50% on member certification. How do you go about determining the level certification training per member? Does a member approach you for more training, or how does that, I'm just curious how that works.
That's probably one of the more complex questions, right? It's a lot of variables, right? And where we have fiercely dedicated volunteers, and they're constantly coming up and saying, hey, can I do more? Can I do more, right? And they're thirsty for knowledge, and we try our best to provide that. And so the vehicle certification that you reference, where we had a goal to have 50% of our members trained as emergency vehicle operators and drivers, came from a consultant's report from, I think it was 2018. And through that report, they recommended that we actually start meeting that standard. Our assistant chief of training said, hey, let's actually start knocking off one of these recommendations here. And as we were in progress of this, the province came out and said, actually, that's now a requirement. So we were well ahead of the way. So I give full credit to my chief of training to kind of push us to get that done. And so through that, endeavoring to provide a high level of service, we exceeded those provincial standards.
We're very fortunate as a community to have that level of training here, so that's great.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. And this is perhaps to you, Mayor White. In light of the issue that I brought up earlier with respect to wires and getting compensation of some form back from some of these things that you service, that one might think were out of your regular purview of, would you be looking for a motion from council to advocate on behalf of the fire department through the regional district, or?
I think technically this is a delegation, so even though it's a regular kind of report, we don't respond to them, but I think it's pretty easy for us to sign on to the SCRD motion that they're working on Thursday. I could keep that in mind. I think there'd be no opposition from council to kind of add our name to it. However, it does go to AVICC, and I don't think any of us are going to AVICC this year, but it'll eventually go to UBCM because it'll probably be supported. So, yeah, we're in kind of a transition year with our regional associations. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so thank you, Chief Michael, and we'll look to Sergeant Newman next for the RCMP 2024 Quarter 4 statistics. Welcome.
Welcome. Hello, everyone. I send my apologies for Staff Sergeant Prunty. She had a conflict in her schedule, so you have me. Yeah, everyone, I believe, has been presented the stats in advance. There's really nothing earth-shattering, no decreases or increases that are troubling or really noteworthy. I think it's been a pretty routine quarter. We move away from the seasonal peaks that we have in quarter 2 and quarter 3, albeit it's spread a little more over the year now, but nothing significant in the stats that we've seen. There are some notes though. Our staffing, good news. We're full, which has been an oddity. We've got a few new recruits in from Regina, which is nice. We've also, hopefully people have noticed an increase in visibility in the town of Gibsons. We've had the bikes out, both the e-bikes and the regular bikes, so we've made an effort to be more visible. That sometimes depending on what's going on, but we've tried to schedule those into our weekly routes. And ICBC road safety, that continues to be a priority both with the buses and the cars. And yeah, that's I don't want to downplay the report, but as you can see, there's no startling increases or troubling from a violent crime or a property offense. I don't want to use the word lucky, but I think it's been a fairly stable and peaceful quarter for the town of Gibsons.
Yeah, that was my observation too. I see numbers down a bit for mental health flag and check well-being, and I know we've heard before that can often fluctuate a lot just based on individuals who might be particularly regular occurrences, I guess. So that's not a surprise that one goes up and down. And really great to see for a while now that the good news about positions being filled, because that was kind of a chronic problem in recent years. I know where.
Yeah, it was more of a
kind of
soft
COVID
vacancy, people off.
related.
Yeah, it's been a struggle, I think, across industries the last 3 or 4 years for sure.
And the visibility is always great to see, and very our community is very happy with that. It came up at our budget dialogue, and it kind of, I think there was kind of an assumption that came out. It seemed like kind of just the chronic view that we don't see enough RCMP, but then which I think was kind of like over the past, but then a couple other people spoke up and said, no, actually, they have noticed an increase in visibility in this past year. So it's good community feedback there.
Yeah, and we're hoping that's going to continue. Like I said, we're trying to build that into a regular thing as opposed to just sometimes it becomes more reactive and extra. We're trying to make that as a weekly or a bi-weekly part of our patrols. So hopefully that is noticeable moving forward.
I think Councillor Kroll may have. Oh, no, yeah, so now that I say that, then I get other hands up, yeah.
Okay.
They're just waiting for you to go first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor White. Thank you for the report. You may or may not be aware, we're looking at reducing our speed limits in certain areas in the town. Will the RCMP be sort of monitoring those areas to enforce the new speed limits?
Yeah, I am aware. Be honest with you, I'm aware through the local media. And that's something we will definitely be on the lookout for. It'll probably more reactive off the start though. I mean, we're going to expect feedback from whether it's the public, but also the town of Gibsons. I'm sure you guys have some plan in place for feedback on how that's going to be received by the public and visitors alike. But no, we're definitely prepared to, should the need arise, if there's an issue with compliance, to increase visibility and look at some enforcement to help those changes, I guess, become more fluid and more embraced by the community.
Yeah, the first step is the roads feeding into Five Corners down here, but there will be a consideration of broadening that through the whole town, and that'll be in a transportation management plan that we're probably going to be pursuing in the next year, and definitely in that case we'll be consulting with the RCMP on any bigger moves like that. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. The school bus issue that was noted in the report and the targeted awareness around that outreach, has that been successful? Is it in process still? Is there further support needed around that comms outreach?
I praised our resourcing earlier. One of the negatives to our resourcing is unfortunately our youth school position has been vacant for much of the year, which would have been spearheading a lot of the school bus thing. So we've managed to do some enforcement. Corporal Latui, I know, has been actively involved in that. So I don't think we've been as successful as we wanted to be. That's just a product of some of the resourcing challenges internally we have had. But we have half the year left and we're gonna continue on it, so. We did have a few projects, that didn't happen as planned, but we're hoping to roll those out still in February and March, so.
Did you have a follow-up?
I was just gonna say, you know, if it's the outreach awareness, obviously, and maybe through our comms director, if there's something that we could do to just support some of that awareness through Facebook or IG.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I see a nod back there. Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. On that note, about safety, I noticed for a long time that I think many drivers don't understand the meaning of a stop sign. They stop after the sign. And in neighborhoods like mine that you don't really have sidewalks, it can be an issue because people are walking with kids, with dogs. Henry and Reed is another big issue. You have a lot of people running there. So I'm just curious if there's any strategy. Maybe police can hide and catch all these people and give them a lot of tickets, and maybe they learn. Because the other day was a big, giant truck. And he was like, sorry. And I'm kind of, wow, almost got me. Thanks God I anticipated, because I live there, I always anticipate. But is there any strategy in place as well?
We are alive to the challenges with road safety. That's a constant. Unfortunately, it's probably never going to change. One of the things that happened as a negative over the last number of years is we lost our local highway patrol members. We do get the sea to sky over 2 to 3 days a month. To be honest with you, that's not sufficient to meet the needs of the entire coast, but they are here and they were just here last weekend. And they do target areas such as that. So as a strategy, our strategy is we try and do some proactive policing. It's important though that both the town and the community communicate areas of concern. Gibsons, like you mentioned, Reed and Henry, that's a commonplace. Reed seems to be a bit of a runway. It's probably got a little better over the last couple of years, but especially with ferry traffic. So we're very much alive to that. But what I would encourage is whether it's the town itself as an entity or citizens to make those complaints to us so we can better target our resourcing.
Thanks. Okay, thank you, Sergeant Newman. And maybe we'll see you again. We'll see. So now to our quarterly reports. First, we have infrastructure services. I'll go to the staff table to see if there's anything to highlight or update.
Thank you, Mayor White. Nothing that requires any specific attention. Just quickly, some of the highlights for the quarter were advancing the DCC bylaw to the point where we anticipate bringing that forward in February. We made some good advancement on our climate portfolio as well. The corporate climate action plan was completed and brought forward to committee, and the low carbon resilience climate action plan kicked off. We completed construction of the Pebbles Beach stairs and the slope stabilization. Just one note on that one, it's come up in the public and some questions from the public and media as well. The stairs are complete, they're considered open. One impact that we noticed with the heavy storms that we received in the mid-December during the high tide is that a significant amount of beach material was washed out, and some of the logs that were up against the base of the retaining wall. So as it is right now, there's maybe a 2 to 3 foot drop from the bottom of the stairs to the beach. So while the stairs are open, people should be extra cautious in approaching it. We do have plans in place. There's a step being fabricated that would get installed there, but in the meantime, it's a bit of a drop down at the beach. So just so the public's aware of that. And then the last note is construction of the office renovation space was largely completed by the end of Q4, and our department has moved over there early in Q1 25. And with that, I'll just turn it over for questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you. I have two questions regarding, well, one was interesting, you mentioned about the ducks, the ducks in the water treatment plant. Do they land on the area there is sewage and?
Through the mayor from time to time, yes.
Yeah, I wonder if there was something, because I didn't think about the contamination they go around. But may I ask the second question? Sure. It regards the lab on the administrative building. So I was just curious what lab.
Again, through the mayor, thank you. The operators at the treatment plant do occasional sampling, and they will do some lab analysis of the effluent and influent just to some of the biology and chemistry of the water. Typically, we do send stuff out to lab, but we are equipped, and it's part of our regular operation of the plant to do some lab testing. So just for health and safety reasons, the intention is to get all of the lab and the samples out of the administration building and into a building that's just next to it that's currently largely vacant.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. You touched on it a little bit in the report, but I just was wondering if you had anything further to add on the rollout as far as timelines and such for the awareness around the speed reduction process there?
Through the mayor, we have advertising in the paper currently. I believe the date that we have planned or communicated out as February 10th would be the date that the reduction in speed limit would kind of go live. So right now, Public Works last week installed signage. So you'll see around some of the streets, there's signs up. The speed limit signs are there, but they're currently bagged. But you can see the post with the new. So there's a sign kind of indicating that there's a change with the bagged sign. So that's a visual cue for drivers to note that that's where there would be a change in the traffic pattern. And the intention would be February 10th, we'll go around and pull all the signs down, and then it would become active. So we wanted to make sure that there was enough time for it to get communicated and for people to get comfortable with the idea.
I wanted to follow up on, I guess the ducks are very kind of symbolic of a problem, which is that I do understand there's kind of been a lot of sludge, and we've been putting out communications to people to be very careful, to people and businesses about grease in particular, and other materials getting into our system. I'm wondering if that's continuing to this day, if there's been any progress with it, because I know it's just been a really significant problem I hear that we haven't really encountered before, and if there needs to be further communications about it.
I do know that it's been a point of attention for our operators. It seems to have been an increased volume of fat and grease that's getting into the system over the last few months. It's an ongoing issue that they deal with. It seems to have accelerated in quarters maybe 3 and 4. And that's kind of what initiated the communication program. They have implemented a fix at the Prowse Road lift station to try to separate some of the grease at the lift station, because it primarily is an issue within the collection system on the foreshore, so seeming to come from the commercial area there. Generally, restaurants are the source of the grease. there is a program in place where all of the commercial restaurants have to have grease interceptors in place. We do check them regularly, but we're going to have a little bit more thorough assessment or investigation of those. So there's a lot of plans. I don't directly know exactly what the operators have planned and as far as timing and if there's been a notice in reduction since that communication has gone out, but I can certainly follow up with those operators.
Okay, yeah, it's certainly it's a town mystery. It's strange we haven't had any kind of development or change in businesses in the town either that would really substantiate why this is happening. So I did have a couple more about Councillor DeAndrade.
Just on this topic, I wonder, it's well known that when you discuss this, any topic with kids in school, they bring this awareness home. So I wonder if there's any intention to do that too, because I think most people forget about that. And obviously, I don't think it's intention. Maybe commercial, they should know better, but regular people do this all the time. So I'm just wondering if it's warranted to have some sort of
That might be more of something our communications coordinator can take note of to.
Yeah, some sort
I
of
mean, it's,
campaign, right?
yeah.
And the kids can experience, right, and clean themselves with paper instead of hot water, things like that. Well, we just,
Wouldn't want to be the teacher having to oversee that. Oh, go ahead, Bronwyn. Yeah,
Make a comment?
yeah.
Just that,
The online, well, I guess maybe the online audience can hear you through that mic up there, yeah.
just that this is a coast-wide issue, and I've been discussing this with my counterparts at the SCRD and the District of Sechelt, and we do plan to join forces in our FOG communication campaign, and sort of taking it as like a coast-wide initiative, because it's it's not just an issue in Gibsons, so it's a real problem everywhere on the coast.
Yeah. So that makes me wonder if this mystery is even greater. I mean, are we saying that, I mean, this is always a problem and it's always something we communicate, but this whole problem with it suddenly drastically increasing in the last few months, has that been happening everywhere?
I believe so, yes.
Wow.
And
I think the Coast Reporter should be on this. This is just bizarre. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. Through you to the Director of Communications comment, even the City of Vancouver, a number of the major news stations in Vancouver have been running items, not immediately, like not right now, but prior to Christmas, they were running ads about warning people about discharging grease because, again, it's clogging up the sewer lines with buildup of congealed grease. So it seems, it's interesting that this is something that's suddenly become so prevalent in, various communities.
Okay, the mystery continues. I wanted to ask about the four-store restoration. There's a little blurb about that in there. I'm wondering when, like a lot of the prep work is being done, is what I read, but when might we see some actual physical work being done down there?
I would anticipate 2026. It'll be just with permitting requirements. So once the planning is all in place, permit applications will go in through the various environmental agencies, regulating agencies, and it would likely be 26 by the time construction would start.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. Excuse me, going back to when we were having the dialogues with respect to our road closure on some of the streets to try and mitigate speeding, there was conversation about the sort of radar things that were put up, your speed is. And as I recall, there are a couple of those units on the coast. I believe is it ICBC that has them? It was mentioned at one of our meetings that they are available, they just need to be set up. But I'm just wondering if it might be prudent to see if we could engage a couple of those in the areas where the speed's being reduced.
CAO.
Through you, Ms. Mayor, I think you mentioned Mr. Hurd the other day. So the Speech Watch organization are the ones that have the little radar sandwich board. So we could follow up with that.
Director.
Through the mayor, we did apply for a modest grant through, I believe it's Vancouver Coastal Health, for some signs similar to that. That would be, I believe the grant would cover 4. So the intention would be to have 2 permanently set up at either end of the school zone on School Road, and then 2 that would float around town. And those 30 areas would be a perfect spot for them.
Great. Well, thank you for the report. I think we're ready to move on to planning. That's 4.2, and I'll look to our Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. So I will just go over some of the some of the projects that are going to impact, that are going to come back to council for some more decisions. So the Housing Accelerator Fund, that's moving along very nicely. There is they do have housing targets. So table 1 on page 2 of the report shows what the housing targets are, and we will meet them by issuing occupancy permits for housing units through the building permit process. The target for the first year was 58 units. And right now, we're trying to sort out our numbers. The report says 51 units, but our statistics are showing us 59 units. So we're really close. We might have met that target and exceeded it, which is great. Initially, when they gave us that grant, they indicated that the issuance of a building permit was good enough. Now the feedback is they want final occupancy of the building permit. So those are 2 different things. So we're going to get clarity on it, but we need to report in February. So that's when we report on the first year of the Housing Accelerator Fund. But hopefully we've met that target of 58 units for the first year. But next year, we're looking at 106 units, and then the following year, 106 units. So those are the targets. In terms of the projects, the milestones and the initiatives, so the infill housing design competition, that has launched, which is really exciting. The submission deadline is March 10th, so we're working towards that deadline. There's 2 lot types. So there's a small lot where we're looking at 3 to 4 units on each lot, so a design with 3 to 4 units. And then the long lot is for 5 to 6 units on those longer lots. And we did add a new public process to what we initially presented to council. So there is now going to be a People's Choice Award announced. So once the panel reviews all the applications and announce the winners, and then we're going to put those 3 winning designs out to the public to get a People's Choice Award. And then, so there's the first, second, and third place, and then the People's Choice Award. So that's really exciting. And that was feedback from our youth counselor, which was great. The next one I'll bring up is the comprehensive land strategy. We had a second workshop with our consultants and to go over what they've reviewed, and then we're going to bring it to council for a second workshop with council to show what properties have been pulled out of all the lands for affordable housing land strategy. So this project must be completed in April, so we're going to have a workshop sometime soon in the next month probably. In terms of the OCP update, it's moving along really well. We had a really great engagement process, and we've got a report later on the agenda, and Colton is going to be presenting virtually on that. So I won't go into detail about that other than it was fantastic and it was a great experience. UBCM, so that was another grant application we got for the Complete Communities, and that's to look at a townwide review of infrastructure that could be impacted when we increase housing density in Gibsons. and that's focusing on identifying the current and future infrastructure deficiencies and identifying which upgrades are needed and what's the most effective, efficient way to service the density that we're going to be getting. I think that's it for the projects that I wanted to highlight. In terms of development, we had a busy year with 70 applications. 26 of them were temporary use permits under short-term rentals, so under residential guest accommodations. So that's what bumped our numbers up quite a bit this year. Quick update for residential guest accommodations. We had 81 business licenses in place for 2024. And then we had that council workshop where we discussed how to move forward in the zoning bylaw, and I'm still looking for some options to bring back. So we're exploring some options, and then we'll come back to council to get some more direction. Then there's a section in the staff report that goes over the new housing legislation. That's a recap. It's all been brought to you before, but I just wanted to share it again. In terms of the building department, we had 77 building permit applications received, and it was a really big year for construction value. So last year, the construction value was about 17.5 million. This year, the construction value was 66.5 million. So quite a huge jump, and that was because of some large multifamily development that's coming to Gibsons. We had 59 housing occupancies granted, and a big chunk of that was for Shaw Road Phase 1. So that was a big boost in our housing units constructed. Revenue is higher this year over last as well, and it's over the last quarters as well. And then in terms of bylaw, everything is just a little bit more than last year. So we've got more complaints coming in, more dogs, more dog licenses, more bylaw enforcement notices are being issued. That's generally the trend, and more business licenses, which is great. So there's the summary. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Thompson lined up first.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to get a little bit of clarity on the Housing Accelerator Fund comment, just as it relates to how they are establishing those numbers, because I think that would be a very big differentiation between occupancy and then how do we look lined up for next year based on that number.
Yeah.
I'll take that question, and I mean I'll go to our director too, but yeah, I have some thoughts on that as well. I think this is classic changing the goalposts. If when we get the grant, it's one thing, and then they decide later that they're going to completely change the criteria. That's not on. Like, we wouldn't be able to do that as a government. So why did the feds get away with it? So I guess we'll see what's happening there, because I know there's a lot of instability federally, and the potential next prime minister is totally against this fund in the first place. So it's unstable. But I mean, I do think we should maybe there is some advocacy needs to be done here. I'll just go to our director for comments on that.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have much to add. We're still learning. They're trickling this information in. So initially, I think they wanted us to meet our targets for the first 3 years, and then that fourth year was going to be questionable. Now I'm not sure how it's going to work out. If we don't meet our targets, then the following year might be less. How they evaluate that, I'm not sure. So it's still unclear, but advocacy would help.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. With regard to short-term rentals, we have the 81 business licenses, and in the submissions of people applying for the licenses, one of the things that came up was a number of the operators are going sort of long-term renting to the film community for the period they're in town. with the MRDT, I'm assuming these operators wouldn't be paying into that anymore if they're renting long-term. Is that correct? And do we have any way of monitoring the revenue loss?
When you say long-term, are you talking like 4 months? Like over the 1 month, but not, yeah. Yeah, interesting. I don't know if staff would have any answer to that, but yeah, there are definitely gray areas between like what would be considered to be a long-term rental under the Residential Tenancy Act, which is kind of indefinite, and the 1 month short-term. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White, and just sort of a follow-up to that, because the primary reason for us allowing these short-term rentals was to support tourism and be able to support our local businesses. I'm not saying that if someone is renting long-term to film crew and things like that, they're not supporting local businesses, but they're probably not supporting to the level that a tourist would be. And in a situation where you have, 2 new tourists or 3 new tourists every week in some of these properties, as opposed to someone renting for 4 months or 5 months, but the other thing is, I'm assuming these operators remove their units from the short-term rental platforms, in which case they wouldn't be paying the MRDT.
It's hard to know. Sunshine Coast Tourism may have some answers for that. But yeah, it's kind of having it's good for our economy to have filming here as well. And then of course, as we've heard from Sunshine Coast tourism fluctuates too. So if we are offering accommodation to the film industry, that it depends on how tourism is going, but that could also be helpful in a year where tourism might be down. But it's all you don't know. You don't really know that tourism is down until usually the statistics come in at the end of the summer. But so it's kind of hard to know. We've got input from Tara.
We only know if people share that information with us. We do have a few people who are doing both. So they're doing 3 months, and then they're also supporting the film crew as well. So I think they're doing 3 months out of the year, but then let's say the first 2 months or 3 months out of the year, they have a rental for the film crew. So, but unfortunately, we only know that information if they share it with us.
Other questions for planning? You mentioned a workshop that we might be doing in next month. That wasn't on my radar yet. So could you, which workshop is that again? I just had a question mark here.
It'll be for the comprehensive land strategy, the affordable land strategy with town properties. So it'll be the second workshop. We haven't scheduled it yet. I just wanted to flag that it'll be coming.
Okay, thanks. Now I think we've got kind of some subsets related to planning here. And which one, based on people's availability, should we do first? I know Colton's got a 3 o'clock out. We've got plenty of time for that. And then, but should we do parking first or?
They both have 3 o'clock timelines.
Okay, well, we've got lots of time for both, I think. Colton, are you there online?
Good afternoon, Mayor White. Yes, I'm here.
So this is to present the OCP Public Engagement Summary and new OCP Policy Direction.
Great. I will get my screen sharing going. And I assume you can hear me?
Yes. Hear you and see you.
Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, Mayor and Councillors. It's great to be back speaking with Council in the town of Gibsons. We're here to celebrate a key milestone, completing the first round of public engagement. And I'd like to highlight to Council the directions that we also propose to take in drafting the OCP. So that'll be the sort of second half of the presentation. And that's highlighted in Appendix B of the council report package. So the proposed directions are based on the feedback that we obtained from the community during the public engagement, from the town's planning staff and the consulting team's research, and also I should mention is also thoroughly informed by the Residents' Assembly earlier in the process. So just a quick overview. We'll cover some communications in terms of what our goal and objective of the engagement approach was. We will share those findings, both the in-person and online findings. I'll cover briefly some of the mapping activities and outcomes, and then speak to those OCP directions and recommendations. And there's a couple slides on, where the project goes next. So in terms of involving the community, the engagement approach was aimed to do just that, to involve as many members and perspectives in the community as possible, and gather their feedback on key issues and topics. And so what we accomplished together was an engagement campaign that engaged over 110 high school students. We spent over 12 hours directly engaging with the community, and there were 250 people attending open house events. There were 6 open house events held, and mapping activities at the in-person engagement events was thoroughly participated in, and similarly online got heavy participation. There were 529 online surveys completed and 213 comments made on the online mapping activity. So we feel this is the kind of finding that demonstrates a fairly thorough and robust engagement, and the findings were very, very interesting. So in terms of engagement goals and approach, the process was designed to provide a pathway to identifying an updated vision for the Gibsons OCP, and to verify what priorities and values mattered most in Gibsons in the update of the OCP. We took advice from the Residents' Assembly to take our engagement out to meet residents where they are in their day-to-day activities in familiar and comfortable locations. And these locations included the Sunnycrest Mall, the Elphinstone Secondary School, the Gibsons Public Library, Tapworks Brewing, the Public Market, and the Community Center. And the online engagement ran from October 23rd to November 15th. So there was ample time to collect all of that feedback online, as well as at the in-person events. In terms of some of the findings, we gathered responses from the general public and high school students and the findings there aligned on their top 3 themes to retain in the OCP update. So both groups favored incorporating housing options and affordability, and actually saying those kinds of words in the updated vision for the OCP. And they held similar levels of support for the preservation of Gibson's natural environment and habitats. And so these priorities can be incorporated into an updated vision statement and reflected as key themes throughout the updated OCP document. In terms of engagement findings related to the 15 values of the Residents' Assembly, we put those in front of the public to gather their feedback. And there was really, really strong support for all of them. No single value from the Residents' Assembly scored less than 75% support. So we've highlighted some of the strongest ones that were supported on screen. And so we feel confident that just as council endorsed these values, the test of these values with the public was very well received. And so we will continue to make sure that those values frame the update to the official community plan. When it comes to some of the recommendations of the Residents' Assembly, we also tested those with the public, and of the 4 recommendations, there was, again, fairly strong support for most of the recommendations, and they're shown again on screen. High levels of support for more housing types and apartments above public buildings, as well as apartments close to shops and services. So we're getting an understanding of what the values of your community are to help us think about, those locations. What are the characteristics that might be the most suitable places for multi-unit housing that's in those more intensive forms like an apartment building. And similar feedback was obtained from students, but they had a lower level of support for apartments above public buildings. There were also recommendations for new developments to reflect seaside village design. There was support for diverse housing types, especially near those daily needs and services, just to help ensure housing options for residents of all household sizes and incomes and stages of life are, close to where they need to be to get the things that they need to support their day-to-day life. So again, this feedback will help shape updated policies and land use designations in the OCP. We also wanted to understand what the common view was on the concept of seaside village character. And so the feedback that we gathered was to try and understand how residents felt about that concept. So based on the OCP statement right now, we'll ensure this beautiful town retains its seaside village character. Participants were shown a list of aspects that we felt could relate to seaside character and asked to choose which were most important to them. Walkability and public access to the waterfront and marinas were identified as the top priorities for the general public, reflecting a strong support for connectivity and enjoyment of the town's natural assets. High school students also valued walkability, but emphasized the importance of ocean views and a diverse mix of shops and services. And we feel the preference for amenities alongside natural features suggests there's definitely an ongoing interest in balancing between preserving the natural and scenic elements of Gibsons while having activities and attractions that complement the experience of being surrounded by nature. Some comments expressed concern about using the term seaside village character. They suggested that defining Gibsons through its maritime history felt subjective. It may limit the potential for growth, and it reflected an outdated concept with some colonial undertones. So the OCP update can address these concerns by zeroing in on specific aspects of the harbor that have high value, rather than relying on a generalized stereotype. So design elements for Lower Gibsons in the update of the OCP could focus on preserving some of those key elements, such as streetscapes, how to address density in forms and shapes that are sensitive to the harbor area, and architectural features. So it's about being more specific to the details while allowing thoughtful growth and modernization to meet the evolving needs of Gibsons. When we explored trade-offs on land use, we wanted to ask, which of these factors were more important? Is it trees and landscaping over parking spaces? That was some of the feedback that we got, that in fact, when looking at trade-offs, policy often requires balancing priorities. So when we asked residents to identify which features or community needs should take precedence over others, when trade-offs need to be made, the feedback we got was that the majority of respondents prioritized trees and landscaping and permeability over parking spaces. When asked to choose between which natural assets should be prioritized as the town grows, the majority of respondents favored preserving Aquifer 560 and trees. And for the general public, absorbing rainwater to reduce flooding was also a high priority, while high school students ranked preserving wildlife habitats as the third most important thing to keep in mind. And when we asked to choose which three features should be the highest priority for growth and development in Gibsons, the majority of respondents supported residential housing and industry and employment as their greatest priorities. For their third option, the general public actually suggested no growth, while high school students favored recreation, including parks. So the results of the trade-off questions suggest that gentle density and infrastructure needs to be incorporated to meet future needs, and that it is essential for the town to preserve its natural assets to maintain a strong connection to nature. Some residents are clearly open to growth that is balanced with the appropriate infrastructure to support population growth, and to address concerns about preserving the town's natural assets and avoid unprepared growth. The OCP update will include objectives, or could include objectives and policies to address these concerns. And in terms of findings related to recreation and culture, we asked questions to help us understand where investments in recreation and culture made the most sense in Gibsons. And access to the coastline, beaches, and waterfront was identified as very important. Access to local trails and pathways ranked second for all participant groups, and the general public ranked local businesses as their third choice, while high school students chose the Gibsons Recreation Center as their third choice. So the feedback really highlights that there are shared community values for preserving and enjoying the town's natural assets, and policies and strategies to improve and maintain access to coastal amenities and trails can be incorporated into the OCP based on this feedback. So just a quick preview of some of the mapping activities. We're very happy to see that the online map was very heavily used and very frequently used as a tool for engagement by residents. The mapping activity received 213 responses and was used to gather feedback where in Gibsons should growth be focused using the blue pins, where in Gibsons are the best places for 4 to 6 story apartments in the orange pins, where in Gibsons should a new park, playground, or other recreation feature be located. That was responded to using green pins. And what are the special places in Gibsons that should be preserved or protected? And that was using the purple pins. And the last online question was, what existing places or spaces need care and attention to make them better or more useful to you? And that was responded to using the red pins. We received a number of map responses in person as well, and I can highlight those, but it's a sign of a very engaged and passionate community. So that was a fantastic way to see how people responded to these questions. So in terms of the mapping in person, when people were thinking about where to focus growth, obviously the hot spots are in Upper Gibsons with a smaller concentration in Lower Gibsons just down at the harbor front. And so when we asked question about where to place 4 to 6 story apartments, you can see that the heat map shows that almost exclusively those responses landed in Upper Gibsons. There's a small hotspot in Gospel Rock, and then very low levels of support for that in Lower Gibsons. When we asked about the locations of new recreational features, there were a number of hotspots in Upper Gibsons, but there were equally and even more intense heat mapping right in the center of Lower Gibsons. So residents obviously would like to have a good spread and access to new recreational features no matter where they live in Gibsons. When looking at places to preserve or protect, the heat maps lined up with where your natural assets are. Where are the ravines and the creeks? And so we saw a lot of responses that landed close to English Trail, Sharman Creek, White Tower Trail, and Arrowhead Park, and a few of the other neighborhood pocket parks. When we asked about places that need care and attention, Lower Gibsons really shone here, and I think that this demonstrates that there's a lot of passion and care for Lower Gibsons. And so a lot of the attention and need for care is kind of oriented down there, with another hotspot up close to Park Road and the highway. In terms of in-person mapping, this is what it looked like. Again, lots of manual feedback provided at the in-person maps. But again, the general public generally felt that growth should be focused north of Gibsons Way. 4 to 6 story apartments should be along and north of Gibsons Way. Those new recreational features should be located throughout Gibsons, and preserving and protecting was focused in Lower Gibsons around the marina and McDougall Park, in areas that need care and attention around the marina and Gospel Rock. So feedback from the students diverged a little bit, but was still generally similar. Focus of growth is north and south of Gibsons Way. They also noted Sharman Creek lands and around McDougall Park or Dougal Park. 4 to 6 story apartments from students. They supported areas near the schools, not surprising when you think about who's answering the question. New recreational features, again, throughout Gibsons, really. protecting and preserving many of the parks were mentioned: Dougal Park, Brothers Memorial Park, the Recreation Center, and the Marina, and areas for care and attention. Brothers Memorial Park, Dougal Park, and Gibsons Park Plaza were frequently mentioned. So what it means for the OCP, we've provided 10 recommendations, and this is directly informed by that public engagement process that I've just highlighted. So continue to be guided by the 15 values of the Residents' Assembly, prepare a revised vision statement that builds on the established vision, but refresh it and inform it by the engagement findings. So adding in that, keeping a focus on the natural environment, the quality of life, and the local economy, but add some new emphasis on housing options and affordability and mobility choices, the coastline and habitat protection. There is an opportunity to move past the notion of seaside village character and instead focus on, the coastline and the habitat protection, climate resilience, and adaptation. We also recommend organizing the OCP from a user's perspective with less editorial content and more navigational cues in the document so that people build a quicker and more robust understanding about how it's used. Focus development permit areas on aquifer protection, the natural environment, and hazard avoidance. And there's an opportunity to consolidate the form and character development permit areas and reduce some of their prescriptiveness, simplify the opportunities for development, and reduce barriers where appropriate. Our fifth recommendation is to reduce the complexity of land use designations by providing new consolidated land use designations that still provide for a logical progression of form and intensity, but are aligned with recommendations of the Residents' Assembly, Bill 44 implications, and Council's inputs. And then our second half of our recommendations are to establish a consistent approach to chapters that feature clear objectives and policies that are outcome oriented and that are more concise and avoid the use of vague terms. Our seventh recommendation is to model some of the implications of the view corridors and their restrictions on housing types and sizes and get feedback on whether to retain, modify, or eliminate some of those view corridors. Our eighth recommendation is to work with staff to understand what policy and mapping content from each neighborhood plan area can be retained and how it relates to the OCP so that it's a little bit better integrated with the OCP so that you don't have these three plans floating out there as back-end chapters to the OCP. And then our ninth recommendation is to review and revise all aspects of the policy and the zoning bylaw regulations to be aligned with the strategic plan of council, many of the town's new policies, such as the urban forest plan, just to provide one recent example. We heard about some climate work that's underway, and so again, there's an opportunity to align and integrate there. And our last recommendation is to update all the maps in the document for clarity and readability. And with that, our land use recommendations is just to look for opportunities to reduce the number of land use designations and consolidate as many similar or overlapping designations as possible, just to bring more simplicity to the development process. But again, not to do so in a way that would lose an opportunity for that logical progression of development intensity. So it will still be organized from sort of lowest intensity to highest level of intensity. And then in terms of the project's next steps, we've summarized the engagement findings today under phase 2. And our next immediate step is to actually draft a structure for the official community plan. So a table of contents and a high-level outline of identifying all those topic areas and subsections in the document before actually filling that draft out more completely. And that would take us into phase 3 of the project. And that concludes my presentation. I look forward to any questions and working with you to update your OCP. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Colton. This is so much work and so many submissions. And as you said, we've got a very engaged and passionate community. So it's very impressive to see all of this consolidated in this format. And that said, I haven't had time to look at every single page and comment yet, so I appreciate this overview. But I do expect everyone on council is probably interested in really digging in on this entire report over time. But I think that we've got the main recommendations from you here and the summary and your presentation. So I'll look to councillors to see if there are questions on that. Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I agree. I think the report was really good. The whole survey was really comprehensive. I'm feeling unease in one area, and I would like if the consultant can explain better. On the community visioning, it says, which topics from the list below would you like to see kept in the updated OCP vision? And seaside character was highly voted. So, but then there's a recommendation to take seaside character from the vision. So I don't understand. Additionally, when you have the second question, which is what.
Councillor DeAndrade, could you give us some page numbers here so people can follow along?
Does Colton have the same material that he shared with council, because it's all here?
Well, I'm more concerned about council being able to follow along with your discussion here. I think he's very familiar with.
He could post on the.
Well, he's got his. No, he's got his presentation that he just showed.
If you go to page, sorry. Page 102 of the report, the big agenda.
Okay, and that may take us a while to get to because there's so many. Oh, there I got it, okay.
So it just says the current OCP has the following vision, which is the vision we are familiar, and then which topics from the list below would you like to see kept in the updated OCP vision? This is just one example. There has been, if you look at every single panel of this nature, they were all highly voted seaside character. Seaside character it received many dots, sometimes almost more, but all the time receive a lot of dots. So I don't understand, because here it says, which topics would you like to see kept in the updated vision? The people responded, but the recommendation is to take this. So following the next.
Is that one question then?
Well, because one follows another, so he can
Okay.
respond, right? So the next question was the next page, 103, the second picture. So the question is, what does Gibsons Seaside Village character mean to you? So the word village implies small, and there was no question about small-scale development. So there's building design elements and all the other ones, views from the ocean. So I'm curious too, why such an important, I sit in council for 6 years and I live in this community for 12. The whole discussion is about Lower Gibsons looking like a quaint, small development, small buildings, to have this feeling, right? Not to develop like North Vancouver or West Vancouver, like with tall buildings. So I don't understand why this such an important word, which village means small, was omitted from that. So I'm feeling, I feel like, I don't think the opinion of people were captured here with this decision to take completely the word.
Okay, well, I just want to go back here because, I'm hearing you say this over and over that Seaside Village character has been removed from the plan. So Colton, could you address that, just in the recommendations? That concern, because it seems like that's really the thrust of things here, of the concern.
Yeah, so certainly our findings, I'm a little bit unclear which page, but I'm looking at the survey summary, and it does appear that seaside character was responded to at about 75%. So I think our findings, should be clear that there was levels of support for that. Is that the page that you're speaking to, Councillor DeAndretti, through the mayor?
No, I think Councillor DeAndretti was looking at a page with the dotmocracy of a lot of dots by Seaside Village character.
But Mayor, what he said reflects, because I'm looking at the visuals and he's looking at the statistics, but they reflect.
Yeah, we understand. I guess I don't want to argue about how many dots there are and what color they are and this kind of thing. I just want to get straight to, like, I think the main concern here is that Councillor Andrade's bringing up, there's a concern on page 192 in the recommendations, which is in the technical memo, about preparing a vision statement that omits a specific mention of Seaside Village character. So I think the question's more, what is that based on, considering that whether it's 75% or a lot of dots or whatever, we can see that there's still community interest in that. So why is the recommendation to admit the specific mention of Seaside Village character?
I guess we felt like there was also a lot of good feedback around being more specific, because I think communicating and having equal understanding around what constitutes Seaside Village character is very much open to interpretation. So we were hoping to zero in on some specificity, and I think some of the examples that we heard about related to access to the waterfront, having vibrant shops and entertainment opportunities at the waterfront. So we thought moving towards that specificity could be more helpful. But we certainly defer to the wishes of council if the desire is to retain a reference to Seaside Village character.
Well, I guess it's everything I'm seeing here in the input, and kind of the input you're bringing back to us is support for continuing the small scale, at least for Lower Gibsons. I saw that over and over again. So, like, if it's not called Seaside Village character, it's kind of hard for us to say, let's omit this, but not knowing what it's replaced with, because it seems like what we're going to replace it with is Seaside Village character, but just a different phrase for it. So maybe we need to go along a bit further and explore this whole concept of removing that phrase, which I know we've come across it so many times that it is a challenge. It's a challenge too, because when new developments come in and they say, well, can you define it or give us more direction on what Seaside Village character is, and that we haven't necessarily had that over the years. So I think that's kind of where you're going, I hope, is look at, make sure this OCP does define what the community is looking for more. So that's my observation about this, but I've also got Councillor Kroll, who's got some, and we did hear from you, Councillor DeAndretti. I'm trying to Councillor Kroll. No, we're just still talking about it. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. I can certainly appreciate Councillor Giandretti's concern, because, we constantly hear this seaside character reference in almost everything we do when it comes to new development and things. And I, looking at particularly the online comments, it was a little more challenging on a small screen to see them, so I will go into greater depth myself in enlarging some of that to get a better sense of the online responding. I applaud the method that has been used here. Previous OCPs, it's been sort of like, what's gone on behind the curtain. And now I think the transparency of this process is truly to be applauded. But something I did want to question, and it goes back to Councillor D'Andretti's dots, is how do you deal with dots when you have the same people attending the neighborhood pop-ups multiple times? Because personally, I went to a couple of them, and I did see a number of the same people enjoying the process of sticking little dots on the panels.
It sounds like you were one of them if you went to multiple. I know you weren't doing the dots.
I wasn't doing the dots, but I was observing who was there. And particularly with seaside character, I think there's some people, if we did fingerprint analysis of the dots, we could figure out who is advocating. Don't get me wrong, I think we need to get, as we proceed with this process, we need to come up with tangible qualities that we want to incorporate into this word that has plagued us of seaside character.
So I want to rewind to council's very first input into this plan. We any council would identify that this phrase, seaside village character, has plagued us. It's a challenge, it's a problem with almost any development that comes up in the lower village, in the village, and yet I think I'm encouraged that we're getting a lot of strong community input in this process that is showing us that people's vision for Gibsons overall and for the lower Gibsons area. And I mean, the question is, do we keep going on like we have and just say, we'll just call it Seaside Village Character and that'll cover things? Because that hasn't worked. Or do we use that phrase? And I mean, I'm not sure, Councillor D'Andretti, if you want to defend Seaside Village Character, which I'm not opposed to at all, we need to somehow find a way to define it better than has been done in the past. So I think that's the main point that I get out of this recommendation to omit it, is that this has been problematic in the past, so we need more details about what this actually looks like. So do we do that with the phrase and then defining it, or do we start with getting rid of the phrase? And I'm going to go to Councillor Thompson and pass the chair for a couple minutes. Councillor D'Andretti. You're chairing.
Thank you. I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor. I've found the Seaside Village character definition very ambiguous. So, to me, being able to see it defined in dots like this, I mean, we can look at it: community events, publicly accessible waterfront spaces, views of the ocean, walkability. I feel like that finally we have some communication from people that this is what that definition means to them. For me, I'd rather, let's get Seaside Village character out of there, because it's just so random, and finally we have an opportunity to see what those values might be to our community. So I feel like this, if that is the intention, which I believe, Colton, that is the messaging here, is that finally we've got a definition of what it means to our community, and that to me is helpful.
I'll speak to, and I'll let you. I think my concern, I'm not attached to the word seaside village, but seaside and the word village means small. And that's what I find, that in the definition, in all the aspects, small scale was not included. And then there was mentioned through the report, talk about coastal. Well, coastal, we are going to get, what is a coastal community? What does it mean? So again, I think the Heritage Society tried to define in terms of pictures what it looks like. I think this exercise was done. Perhaps more should be done with the public if they agree. Again, I don't mind if the word itself is not there, but the fact that small scale was omitted from this, I find a big deal, because right now, the small scale that people cherish in Lower Gibson was not included.
Yeah, I think this is getting a bit overblown. I mean, I think it would be a big deal if we're going to use things like big deal, if Seaside Village character and all this input we're getting about keeping the scale of Lower Gibson small were ignored, and there was a proposal here to say, let's have a bunch of skyscrapers down there. That's not what's going on here. This is clearly following the vision of the community to keep Lower Gibson small and small scale. It's just a suggestion to maybe we should get rid of this vague wording that has plagued us for years, and sharpen it a little bit, make it clearer, have some more details. Councillor Kroll, and I would like to go back to Colton at some point about his reflection on some of the discussion he's heard here so far, and just to give us a better idea of I want to be clear, by removing this phrase, it's not saying the opposite of Seaside Village character will now be Lower Gibsons at all. That's not what is being suggested. So I think maybe we should give the consultant a chance to explain a little more about what would replace that, and we can't see that in this 2-page kind of technical report, but I'm sure he and his team have had some discussions on this. I'm going to go to Councillor Kroll first, though.
Thank you, Mayor White. I'll just keep it brief. You know, I think we all acknowledge the seaside character term has sort of been almost the bane of our existence over the past, well, certainly the last 6 years that I've been on council, and certainly in the period I've been involved on the ADP. I think it's really significant that we are, out of this report, we are getting values associated with seaside character. As Councillor D'Andretti mentioned, the Heritage Society and a group of citizens have submitted qualities that they would like to see incorporated into the new OCP. And I'm assuming that once this is being drafted, we have qualities, we have all these various components that hopefully will be incorporated into what we move forward with, that we can say, look at the OCP, here's pictures of what seaside character is, here are the values we're looking for. So I'm very encouraged that out of this, we're going to finally say, we can move forward. We have something simple that we're not going to be struggling at every meeting with, well, this doesn't meet seaside character, because developers will have the opportunity of looking at this report and saying, oh, okay, we can do that.
Thanks. Colton.
Yeah, thank you. I think I've been hearing and listening actively. I think I'm hearing that there is an interest in seeing a vision that speaks to village or small scale, but absolutely, I am listening actively. We were just trying to understand a bit more, like, what's behind the concept of seaside village character, and the things that we heard a lot, resonated with us, where people definitely said it still means maintaining historic architecture. It means piers and marinas. It means a variety of activities on the waterfront. So those are the things we will highlight in policy. And then in terms of draft vision, we'll be back to you with our suggestion before it goes out for further public engagement. So just in that phase 3, I think that what we've heard today from council is great food for thought. So we'll be working on an update to that vision and put it to you for your reaction and your refinement. So I hope that helps.
Thanks. So I do recommendation option is not totally clear in the report here, like at the top, or in the agenda, but I think there is one. Yeah, and it is in the agenda. That the OCP policy recommendations in the technical memo dated January 9th, 2025 be endorsed. I just want to, before I'm just introducing that, and we do have the concern here that the kind of direct language about omitting this is a concern. And even to me, it's kind of like, I feel like it should be considered for sure. It might be is that what our problem has been? Are those words in terms of being able to define it, or could we continue to have those words but still just have some definition? I don't know yet, because I haven't seen the work that your team is going to do. So I'd be more comfortable with, at this point, with saying something like consider omitting it.
Or review alternatives.
Yeah, review alternatives to the phrase seaside village character.
Certainly something that gives you an opportunity for consideration is certainly a friendly, no problem with that.
Okay. So I'm just, there's so many pages here. I just want to make sure we get this. I think, if we were to say, I don't have the language right in front of me, but if we were to say the same recommendation as written be endorsed with the word omit in relation to seaside village character being replaced by review alternatives to. Does that? Okay.
I think that gives us an opportunity to explore those alternatives and to have that further discussion.
Great. Okay, so I see Councillor Kroll will move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor DeAndrade. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? The motion carries. So thank you very much, Colton, and thanks for hearing us out on this important conversation that always needs to be had. The town of Gibsons on seaside village character. I think and this is only the beginning. Well, we'll see what you come up with now. And more specifically, what are the next steps? I kind of see the general next steps there over the next quarter, but is there a kind of exact time when we might see a next that we know about?
Yeah, our exact next steps are to draft the outline of the OCP, and I think we will also need to get started on some possible vision statements with those alternatives in hand, and then we'll bring those back to you in spring of this year.
Excellent. Okay, so I think that concludes this report. Thank you very much, Colton.
You're welcome. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Now we'll move on to 4.4, parking strategy, work plan, and I think Kirsten is going to do a presentation on this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There we go. I've just got a background slide to peruse, but a quick verbal report. This report shares the parking study work plan that was prepared by Urban Systems and asks for council's support to move forward with next steps of that study. A little bit of background, the study of the town's parking is a project that's been, the need for which has been recognized for many years but has lacked funding. And funding was finally awarded for the project in the spring of 2024 as one of 4 of the projects included in the Housing Accelerator Fund. A work plan has now been drafted by Urban Systems and fine-tuned with input from staff through Q4 of last year. And some of the needs that we're looking to address with this study include with the new housing legislation from the province and looking at zoning for infill, we're looking to balance land use needs, including parking, green space, infrastructure, and housing, with a lot of variance requests for larger developments. Recently, this suggests the need to update parking policy for those projects as well. Existing reference studies that we're seeing for parking reductions and so on are coming out of, are usually based in Metro Vancouver, while limited transportation options on the coast suggest a need for local data or indicate a need for local data because we just don't have that relevant reference right now. And increases in summer visitors have increased parking demand, requiring updates to our parking management strategy. So the town has committed to completing the on-site parking needs review as part of this project to receive half funding. That's part of the rationale for moving forward at this point as well. This slide shows a brief summary of the work plan, but the full plan's attached to the report. Staff are currently working on phase 1 of the study, supporting the consultant with gathering data about current parking policy and conditions on the ground. Next steps include on-site studies of parking conditions and synthesizing data to understand issues and priorities within the town, as well as reviewing policies in other communities and best practices. Phase 3 will include development of policy and parking management recommendations, that's work by the consultant, and has options for targeted consultation in response to issues that might be identified in phase 2 of the study. So the final phase is delivery of a parking strategy for the town, a parking strategy report. There's also an earlier existing conditions report that will come out of phase 2. And at this point, staff is looking for council's endorsement of the project work plan, and we welcome any comments or considerations before moving forward to the next phase.
I see Councillor Thompson first, and Councillor D'Andretti.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I found the parking inventory and demand summary a bit unclear on how tourist parking would be considered. And if it's going to be done through a conditions review, the project schedule wouldn't actually fall into the summer tourist season. So I'm just wondering how that would be considered.
Staff.
Mayor. Yeah, this is an issue that staff raised as well, but luckily we've just received new cadastral mapping data, the air photos from 2024 that do happen to capture some of that summer use. So that at least gives us a snapshot in time that we've shared with the consultant, and they'll feed into that part of the study.
Councillor D'Andretti.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, no, I like the report. I thought it was really well written. A part that I don't understand is the optional. Why is it optional? I thought that parking survey and stakeholder conversation would be important in this mix, but I don't understand because it's optional, but then they say that's what they are gonna do, so I'm unclear.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, this part is optional in terms of like the funding or the project costs will be adjusted depending on what's needed. But staff agrees that some consultation would probably be appropriate, but it just depends what issues are identified in the early stages and then getting targeted feedback. So rather than necessarily a townwide survey, we might be looking to understand a certain question and go to business owners, or we might ask a certain neighborhood about a certain issue.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. Long overdue, so it's really very encouraging to see this, and obviously it's information that we can use to incorporate into the bigger scheme. So I would like to move the recommendation.
I see Councillor Thompson seconding this. Any more discussion? All those in favor? The motion carries. Thank you, Kirsten. I think we're ready to move on to the quarterly report for Finance and Human Resources Department for quarter 4. Go to our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mayor White. There's nothing of great excitement in the fourth quarter report, to be frank. I'm happy to take any questions, and the only thing that was unusual was we did have to respond to the Postal Canada shutdown, which we did, and it got us to finish a project that the department had been working on for a couple of years. We finally made it happen, so that was the good news. That was electronic fund payments to our suppliers,
Right.
actually making it a thing rather than a rare activity. Thank you.
Which I know well, something that involves my my initials. Any questions on the whole report? Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think it's for the Director of Finance. Sorry, your report was so good that I don't have questions. It's just a clarification. The lower watershed climate adaptation through natural assets is a whole project on Aaron Park, Charmer Creek, all this, or is a new one?
Okay, Director of Infrastructure.
Through the mayor, yeah, that's the creek restoration project, so Sharman Creek and Goosebird. Yeah.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. Again, I just echo what Councillor D'Andretti had to say. It's a great report, but I'd also like to acknowledge, as we're going into budget, that the assessment notices are out, and they seem to be up slightly over last year, which hopefully will help with the funding stream with some of the challenges we're faced with. And I'd just like to thank both you and the Director of Infrastructure for your participation in the community engagement. I think that was incredibly helpful. And, it just, again, makes us more front-facing when we're dealing with the public, that they have the opportunity to engage in the manner in which they did. So I'd like to sincerely thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kroll. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much. And there's also a policy related to finance as well, the gifts and issue of receipts for tax purposes.
Thank you, Mayor White. Yes, this whole area of the issue of a local government's ability to issue tax receipts often gives rise to confusion. Part of it is because sometimes there is a policy not written up, so we have a draft one here now to help for that. Also because there's incredible amounts of confusion about how this is all supposed to work. And I would just like to turn to the draft policy, page 3. And the best I and others can do to totally simplify this is to say it's highly legal in how it's all structured, but essentially the community charter says that the local government can get revenues from a variety of ways, including gifts. And then the Income Tax Act says, yes, all local governments are registered Canadian municipalities and qualified donees, and therefore they have a right to issue these tax receipts for tax purposes. And then Canada Revenue Agency, because of so much trouble over the years in this area, has given lots and lots of guidance on how and when you can issue these receipts. So if you get into the detail behind this, what you quickly realize is there's no complications where somebody just appears and says, I want to donate $100 to the town. It starts getting complicated when people start saying, well, I would like to give for this purpose. And even though that sounds reasonable enough, that can get you offside the Income Tax Act really fast. So the way to finesse that, hence the written policy, is for council to spell out in advance all the places it would be quite happy on behalf of the town to accept money for specific purposes. So you suddenly make specific purpose gifts general in nature by doing it that way. So staff are asking that this policy be recommended to council for adoption so that we have a way of, essentially, this is written that all the places we could receive donations for capital projects are covered off. On a couple of limited spots where third parties to the town, but associated with the town, deliver programs, say like Gibsons Public Market, that the town is quite prepared to issue donation receipts for some of their programming. And then in more limited circumstances, again, if the town is needed as a flow-through, so there's somebody who wants to grant money to one of these third parties, the third party isn't a taxable charitable organization. They need the people willing to donate the money have to donate it to somebody like that. Well, they can donate it to the town because we qualify that way. And we can do that provided it's something that falls within the broad mandate of what this local government does. And the safest way to have that defined up front is to have council bless a current listing, which you can refine and change over time if you've missed out on something, or if something big comes up. We heard an example from the fire department of a $2.3 million gift. If it's not already quite clear in the policy that that can be accepted, then it's that's a good time to visit council and just explain how somebody's proposal fits or doesn't, and see what council of the day wishes to do. All assuming they're all legal. I hope that helps. I'm enthusiastic about this kind of policy because I've just seen community groups and individuals from communities donate incredible amounts of funding and time to do things that inspire them in the community. So it's nice to have it laid out that the idea after this was adopted is to visit with the organizations and people listed here to explain how it works so they know they have this tool. And I'll just finish with, because in the meantime, without this, what happens is out of the blue, the mayor, the CAO, the director of finance, all kinds of staff members get these emails that appear about all of these kinds of topics. And when you don't have it set down how the town wants to handle it, it's an incredible waste of time as the email chain wanders around, and frustrating. I've seen mayors who don't get answers in the end about, like, can we do this? This will help avoid that, and people can be really efficient on the yeses and nos. Thank you.
Are there any questions first? Okay, I see Councillor DeAndretti moving adoption of this policy and seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any discussion? All those in favor? The motion carries. So very good explanation. There are no questions. And now we are on to 4.7, which is the Corporate Administration and Legislative Services Department Quarter 4 report. I'll go to our CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just be brief, considering timing and so on. So in our report here, Rebecca and Tracy are here too to comment further. But my focus has been primarily on the strategic plan for this last quarter, just updating the actions, including work with Bronin on the website. So what's up there is our best, most available information for the status of those initiatives on your strategic plan. Behind the scenes there, I think on the first quarter, we'll be able to report more specifically on ongoing discussions around regional water and particularly solid waste. Council will see results of a tender in short order in the next few weeks here. And there are broader discussions around the future of solid waste on the coast. Harbor strategy as well. I know Council has been working with the Harbor Authority, and staff got some opportunities to provide some additional information to Council and GLHA's board, and a lot of work on the resilience planning and our predictive model, and I'll pretty sure Michelle will have lots to report on that as well in the next quarter. So maybe Rebecca, you want to highlight some portions for your portion? Thank you.
You, Mr. Mayor. I think Manny's done a really nice broad cover of all the things that we've been working on. Lots of contract work continues, supporting the efforts of the rest of our team, who often are the ones actually drafting or working with legal teams on the terms of the agreements, but finalizing them can involve a lot of back and forth, which some of them did this quarter, over tweaking of terms and looking down the road to protecting the town from future liability as much as possible. Of our FOIs, 6 came in November and December. So that kept me pretty busy this last term. I don't know if Tracy wishes to add anything about the work she was doing, but I know the shift over to 494 occupied a lot of her time and energies, as well as working towards the GLHA and some of the things that Manny's mentioned. And of course, the meeting supports are always an ongoing and cyclical recurring work. So I don't know if you have any questions, but that's all I have to add.
I will look to council for questions. Councillor D'Andretti.
It's not really a question, but I appreciate the level of detail. I think I said this before, but this report in particular, even with the courses that staff take, it really, I think, not only show the bar raised, that our staff is well trained, but it also shows the amount of work that is carried throughout the quarter. So for me, it's great because even though I understand a lot of the work, but it's always surprising. More work that I was not even aware. So I appreciate that, and I hope the public does too.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. It was noted that senior staff had met with the Gibsons Fire Department and preliminary discussions were held regarding services and policies. And I'm wondering if there would be a more formal update on that, or is that just process? Is that a routine thing that happens?
There was some just general discussion, very preliminary. There was the meeting really was more around a particular development at that one meeting. Other than that, it's very preliminary general discussion and just kind of keeping an eye on the changes that we see through the SCRD reporting as well.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. To Councillor Andretti's comment about this report, I think, it really is an eye-opener in all the reports we've received today, just how much work goes on behind the scenes. And we had a good turnout at the budget meeting, but I don't know how many of the public actually look through this agenda and see these reports and realize how much work is being done on their behalf. And I don't think if you went out on the street and asked anyone if they looked at these reports would say, oh yeah, I've been really impressed with what's going on. So, not that we want to, staff want to break their arms patting themselves on the back, but they really do need recognition. And I don't know how we can get more public engagement into seeing these reports and being able to acknowledge all that's being done on their behalf.
Okay. Strategic plan tracker. I think are we on to that, or is there any more questions? Go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't sure on the strategic planning tracker. Prepared to answer any questions on any specifics. So
yeah, I just don't remember you mentioning it in the report, so I just don't. Yeah, okay. So that's there too. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. No one asked on that. Okay.
Hoping through you that we can, similar to what was done last year, that staff can meet with yourself and council on going over some additional actions for the plan. I think it worked relatively well last year, and we'll work to schedule those depending on your availability too.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so the next regular committee of the whole meeting will be held Tuesday, February 4th, 2025 at 1 p.m. And does someone want to Counselor Kroll is moving to adjourn, seconded by Counselor Thompson. All those in favor? The meeting is adjourned.